Hey, this is Kat Stancic, the lead boss with the Revenue Accelerator. And today I have Johanna Walker with me, who is, well, let's just sum it down to an amazing speaker and just has this huge stage presence that also encourages and supports her clients in doing the same. So she is a fear blasting storytelling maven for coaches, consultants, leaders, and change makers, also known as a public speaking coach. I love that you have humor in your bio. As a keynote speaker and workshop facilitator, she has presented for corporations, nonprofits, startups, community organizations, and of course, the TEDx stage, because you ain't make it until you made it there. So helping audiences develop authentic presence, what they want to be known for, super, super important, and turn all of that into a compelling presentation that helps you convert, right? Joanna is the founder of Craft Your Uniquely You Client Attracting Change the World Talk, and she has written and performed solo theater pieces that she's toured throughout the US and Canada, and has a plethora of hobbies and activities that she is a part of. Johanna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
What got you into speaking? Because it's not like we lay awake at night as small children thinking, I want to be a speaker. Sure, we want the limelight, but we don't think necessarily that that's going to be the thing that we do. So how did you tap into this as being your passion and your mission?
Yeah, quite the opposite. In fact, as a young person, I was terrified of speaking,
Mm,
terrified. I was really shy, really quiet kid. I would go for days sometimes without speaking.
mm,
So speaking was not my thing, but I was always a writer. I had stacks and stacks of journals. That was how I connected to my that's how I stayed connected to my humanity. And
ah,
then as a young adult, I started reading at poetry readings. And, so it was poetry and theater and dance that got me on stage and kind of got me over my fear
ah.
of just existing in the world. And then it was about 8 years ago, I was teaching a solo performance class. So I was doing a lot of work in theater, living mostly as a starving artist,
Mm.
and I was teaching a solo performance class, and one of my students was invited to give a TEDx talk. And that was before TEDx was totally just a household ubiquitous name.
Right,
I was like,
right.
oh yeah, TEDx, that thing over there that some people do. And she asked if I could help her, and I was like, sure. And I knew nothing about. I had spent a lot of time on stage as a theater artist, but as a speaker, it was kind of like totally clueless.
Mm.
So I helped her. She paid me $50 an hour, which was more money than I'd ever made. And I was like, oh, cool, I could do that. So I hung my shingle as a public speaking coach, reached
Mm.
out to a friend who had been through a similar theater training, and he had a business as a speaking coach in the Bay Area. And he kind
Mm.
of took me on and trained me in how he had applied the theater training to coaching, and then had a basic business training. And there I was. And people started, so I started working, I started getting clients. Still kind of, I came in through the back door. It wasn't like this big vision. I want to help people reclaim their voices and start this business. It was like, oh, cool, I
Yeah.
can make money doing that. And then in the process of starting to work with people, starting to get myself on stages
Mm.
and figuring out what I had to say, and that I had something to say that was valuable and that people wanted to hear, and
Mm.
starting to see the transformation that people had when they connect with their voice and they get on stage and they say something. Then it was like, oh, I'm actually doing something that really matters.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, there's a lot of women out there. I think, we can all kind of agree that we are either, and typically both, triggered by the too much and not enough, and always the wrong thing at the right time. So, it's kind of the two sides to the same coin. And really this capacity and capability to connect to your voice, right? That thing that we were told to suppress by society for the most part, and to really kind of step out as your true self. I mean, it's really an empowerment movement and experience, not only I think for the speaker, but also for the audience to witness that person
Yeah.
standing in their power.
It's no small thing. It's no small thing. I think we don't, as young people in generally, but certainly especially as girls,
Mm-hmm.
didn't really get the invitation or the support or the soft landing pad to be fully
Yeah.
human, to be fully who we are. It's like we're trying to get tucked in and do it right and fit in the box and, you know,
Conform.
conform.
So I know you have, I mean, this expertise. I love that you come from a theater background. I hadn't even associated speaking really with this. I know that people did improv as part of trying to get more comfortable, but I hadn't really kind of associated a skill set as having had that and then moving into speaking versus the other way around, which is I feel like most people do. Like they kind of go into speaking and then they have to work on this other stuff.
Right.
So, what is essential when it comes to speaking when people are scared and uncomfortable? But there's this desire. I think we all understand as entrepreneurs, especially established entrepreneurs, that your audience is where your leads are going to come from, right? Like if you're in the business of being in business, you need to have leads, you need to have an audience, you have to have community. So we know that we want to grow our audience. I think most people understand and come to you when they're in that place of, okay, I know I want to speak because this is a strategy that I think will help me establish and do that for myself. So how do you support people by getting past that discomfort or that scary, like stage fright kind of thing? Because that's probably what holds a lot of people back, I would assume.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the most important thing is presence.
Mm.
And I think when I started performing on stages just as a solo theater artist, I was utterly terrified every time before I would get on stage, and I would be like,
Talk about vulnerability. Oof.
yeah. I was always like, Johanna, why do you do this? I'm never going to do this again. This is ridiculous. This is so uncomfortable. This is awful. Why do you put yourself through this?
Oh, all entrepreneurs have to have some level of like whatever. Anyway, that word tendencies, because we really put ourselves in a lot of uncomfortable situations.
Sure. And I feel like what I learned in doing that was how to be present with that discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you can be present with the discomfort, when the impulse is, this is uncomfortable, therefore I'm not going to do it. This is uncomfortable, therefore I have to go the other way. I have to get myself out of this discomfort rather than going towards the discomfort and learning how to be fully present with it. And that to notice that the discomfort doesn't actually kill you. But when you can be present with it, it actually gives you more access to more of yourself. There's some wisdom in the discomfort. There's your body telling you something it needs to know. And so when you can show up for it with compassion and breath and presence and heart, it actually brings you more of your humanity into the room. And that's when your audience connects with you, is when you're showing up as a human being.
Yep.
That's what we want, is to connect with our audience. And when they can feel you fully in the room, they're going to be like, I want to hear what you have to say. And so that means that even if you're scared and uncomfortable, and it's like, how do you really bring yourself to that moment and show up with your full humanity? I think that's powerful stuff.
So how do you stay present? Because I've seen people run off stages, right, when everything's kind of gone wrong. I know the saying, I've experienced the saying, I've lived it, in terms of it's not how you are when things go right, it's how you are when things go wrong. That is a true measure of your character. So how do you stay present and don't, lose your shit, if you will, or like freak out, or, really beat yourself up when this discomfort lands, whether the tech went wrong or you can't remember your talking points or whatever it is? How do you stay present and use that as an empowering experience?
Well, I have two things to say to that. One is to be prepared, to practice, and to know your talk. To know your talk. When I help people craft talks, I talk about it's not about memorizing your talk. It's about knowing it.
Yeah.
That you really know, the journey you're taking your audience on. You know how you're starting, you know where you're going, you know where you want to end up, and you know it in your bones, you know it in your body. So a lot of the practices are like, how do you get your talk in your bones, in your heart, in your breath? So you're not reading it off of the top of your brain because you've memorized it, but you really know it. And then when the slides don't work or the light's off or some audience makes some strange noise or something happens.
Because it's going to happen.
It's like, you have flow and fluidity with your content because you've dug in and you know it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that just happens through practice, right? I mean, you can't go, I mean, I would assume I've been there in terms of God, trying to master every single line of my speech and trying to remember all the points and everything that I wanted to do and trying to memorize it and practicing it beforehand. And I know now that I can go on stage and I can just riff. It doesn't matter where you drop me in on that
Yeah.
speech, I can just go. And if at the drop of a hat, I have to change course, because I mean, and I guess this is the question that's coming out, which is, you know, you can establish and understand about having that discomfort. You can practice and get to that point where you know your beats. How do you read the audience? Because that's, I think, like that second level mastery of, you know, you can have your speech and you can figure it out and you can even memorize it. But I've seen people give the same speech in two different scenarios and one lands and one doesn't. So like for me, that's probably an audience thing. Maybe there's something I'm missing because I'm not the, you know, the expert in this. But you know, what's missing when the talk doesn't hit, even though you've memorized the beats and all that.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, one is that just shows that you're not speaking in a vacuum. It's not just about you delivering your talk.
Yeah.
The way you practiced it. It's about you showing up in the room and meeting the audience and seeing, you know, feeling that give and take, that responsiveness and the energy that they're giving back to you. So even the same talk given it's a different talk because there's a different audience.
Yeah.
And so there's a different exchange happening. And the more you can be open to that, just that energy in the room of who's the audience, how are they vibing with your talk?
Yeah.
And the more fluid that you have, like, oh, I can tell this isn't the story to tell this audience. I got to flip over to this story, you know, and to be able to have that kind of flexibility is really crucial. I remember I was giving a talk to a group of MBA students, and they were, you know, their teacher brought me in. It was at CU, and their teacher brought me in, and I'm like theatrical, and I get in your body and voice, and and they were sitting there. They all had their computers open, their arms folded across the desk, sitting back in the chair.
I was an MBA student at one point,
they were
and
just
I remember that.
You know, they were like,
old.
All right, show me what, you know, why should I? And so I think what happens for people is they get into a kind of urgency in that moment. If you ever get an unresponsive audience, then it's like, oh, I got to be more animated and I gotta try to entertain you. And, you know, there's some urgency that people get into. And I think when you can kind of drop back and just feel the room, and how do you meet them right where they are?
Yeah.
You know, and by the end of that time, I had them leaning forward, you know, in their bodies. Actually, I had them on their feet making sound.
That right there, like if you guys listening, that right there is like a key master stroke strategy, right? Like redirecting, like if the energy's not there, like changing the energy by getting people out of their comfort zone, which is this defensive, right? I mean, that's marketing, right? People are always on the defensive. They're always ready to say no and not like whatever's going to happen. And what sounds like you did was you shifted the strategy so that you could get them in their bodies so they could be present with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it has to start with where they are right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to start with where they are and then figure out how to like massage them to where you want them to be.
Yeah.
So
and
it's
what
tricky.
you were sharing with that presence and that mindfulness, I think that especially when things aren't going right, I know that I've had this tendency, which is, all right, let me just get through this. And then you start picking up the pace, you start talking faster, you just start hitting the points, you kind of almost go blind where you don't see the audience anymore because there's that disconnect. And so they're not connecting to me, so I can't connect to them. And you just go tunnel vision. I just need to get through this and get the hell out of here because it's not going to work. What do you recommend in those instances? Because I think that that's fight or flight kind of reaction that a lot of newer speakers, if you will, might experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think presence, like what you described is going into your head and saying, oh no, what do I do now? How do I deal with this? I got to get out of here. Let me just, if I talk a little faster, it'll be over sooner. Like that's being in your head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how do you get into your body and
Mm.
into your breath and into the moment of discomfort? Like that's a different kind of discomfort. It's a
Yeah.
different kind of discomfort because it's like you're not feeling you're not having all this energy that you get to feed off of.
Mm.
So you got to be present with the discomfort. And the sort of the snap shift statement I use is back to the body.
Mm.
Back to the body. And when I catch myself in my head trying to figure out what to do and buzzing up here in my
Right.
head, and I say back to the body, then it's like, oh, here's my breath, here's my feet, I'm in this room, I look around, it's uncomfortable because I'm not sure what's happening. But when you can be present in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
then the next breath, you're going to take another breath. And the more you can be in the room when you're taking that next breath, something's going to shift.
Yeah.
Something's going to shift.
I think, and take that same strategy and apply it to any conversation you're having, whether you're doing lead generation, having a sales call.
Yeah.
I think, that's kind of one of those master skill sets that just translates into all area of your business. Because I think that a lot of time when we're operating unintentionally, sometimes from a place of lack, and I don't care who you are, what level of business you're in, there's always that place where there's that something gets triggered, right? And we just operate from there and then we get out of it. But that strategy right there is something that's fantastic to be able to leverage as part of getting back out of it and into what's important.
Yeah. And it's practice. It's practice. It's all practice. Like you might have some gigs that bomb,
I mean, sometimes you just have to accept that. I mean, it's better than the perfection paralysis where people don't even get out there and do it, or they practice their speech, 15,000 times and never actually deliver it.
Yeah, if you can always be in with curiosity, like showing up with curiosity and learning, like how can I learn? How can I learn from this opportunity? How can I learn from this talk? Even when I give a great talk, I still want to learn from it.
Right.
What could I do a little bit differently? Where did I gap out? Where did I kind of go flat?
Yeah, I mean, and that actually leads to my next question, which is, for me, I know that I'm a staunch believer in storytelling as one of the most effective ways for marketing. So I think that you agree with that in terms of also being for speaking. So, how do you structure a talk with that story, with that compellingness and relevance to help with that audience engagement? Because I mean, I would assume that audience engagement is pretty critical to the whole experience when you're delivering a speech.
Yeah, that's what it's about. That's what it's about. You want to why talk if you're not going to engage with your audience?
Oh, there's a lot of people who do that, but yes,
I know.
we're trying to get results. So we're trying to do that.
Yeah. I think people speak for the sake of speaking without even thinking about connecting to the audience. And I think that's true for storytelling. People tell stories just for the sake of telling stories. It's like, oh, they told me to tell more stories, so I'm telling more stories. Okay. And it's so important for the story to be relevant. One, relevant to the idea you're trying to convey. How does the story support the idea you're trying to convey? And how is the story relevant to the audience and what the audience is there for and what they want and need? So it's really building that whole arc. And I like to think of the talk itself as a story. A story is a journey.
Yeah.
Something happens. There's a transformation at the end. And so you're taking the audience on a journey. They're at a particular place when they come into the room, and you want them to be transformed at the end of your talk. Why give a talk if you're not going to transform your audience? That's the goal. So what's the journey you're taking your audience on? So it means knowing where they are when they come in and where do you want them to be when they come out, and what are the stories. Then there are stories inside the talk. So what are the stories you can tell? How do you craft the stories so that you take the audience on that journey that you want? And they get to have the transformation they came for.
Yeah.
And you become the guide in their journey.
I mean,
that's when they say, hey, how do I get more of you?
Yeah. How much do you think inspiration plays a role as part of the overall, speaking, engagement, exchange? Like what is the role of inspiration when you are a professional speaker?
what is the role of inspiration? You mean my own inspiration or
Our
inspiring?
ability as a speaker to inspire the audience. Is that something that a speaker should be trying to target? I mean, but like personally, my philosophy-ish, right, is that people take action when they are more, they take more action when they're in a place of inspiration, meaning that there's hope, there's desire, all of those things are activated within them. And
Yeah.
so when you're speaking, when you're sharing content, not to say that we don't share negative stories or we don't share the hero's journey kind of experience, but overall, there's more positive experiences when there's that inspirational emotion in the room versus one where you're kind of triggering the negative doubts, the lack of the fear of missing out, like those kind of bro marketing kind of strategies where you're just like, only 2 spots left, only for the next 2 minutes, only for the next 2 people kind of stuff. Like that for me doesn't feel empowered.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the goal is for your audience to take action. Whether you're selling something, I mean, you're always selling an idea.
Right.
So even if you're not selling a product or a service, you're selling an idea. You want the audience to say yes to your idea. You want them to take some kind of action so that they can get the thing they want.
Right.
That you want them to take that action. And I believe that yes, when they're inspired, if you can tap into the thing that they want and the vision of what's possible, and convey that to them, like that's inspiration, then they see the possibility. They see more clearly what they want and that it's possible.
Right.
So they're inspired. Then they're like, what action do I need to take to get to that thing? So I think definitely inspiration is painting a picture of that vision, showing them what's possible and that it's possible.
So, I mean, everyone has a bunch of people who do the same thing that we do, right? So there's a lot of people who teach strategies around speaking. There's a lot of people who teach lead generation tactics and things along those lines. What do you see that people who are speaking, right, whoever they learn from, it doesn't matter. What do you see them like really missing when it comes to making their experience, their talk more impactful? Because there's like these things, these little nuances that only someone like you would be able to identify.
Yeah. I think the two things, say two things. One is embodiment, being in their bodies. I think that a lot of us are afraid of being in our bodies and of showing up fully in our bodies and our breath and our voice. And I think that's where so much power lies. And I think especially for somebody who's scared of public speaking and who's just anxious about getting on stage, it's kind of like, well, I can get through this. I'm going to do this. And you're on stage with your whole body, but it's just your head doing all the talking and they get caught in their head. So I think there's so much power in dropping down into our bodies, which means being in my feet, in my pelvis. My breath is in my pelvis. My breath is, and really getting to show up. And that's scary. Like, it's like I said, because then you have to feel all the discomfort. If you're really going to show up in your body, then you have to feel all the discomfort. And that's uncomfortable. And it's scary. And it's so powerful when you do it.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true for the content, for storytelling, is really being willing to be vulnerable. And it's not just for the sake of vulnerability. It's not about like, I have to talk about all my childhood traumas and all my suffering and how hard my life is. It's just about being human. It's just about being you and being real.
Yeah. And
showing up in your imperfection, in your neuroses, and really just as an actual human being with a story to tell. That's where the connection happens. And I think so many people just skip over that, or they go for extreme vulnerability because that's all the rage and everybody says be vulnerable. So I'm going to just like pour out all my trauma. Yeah. Or it's like, I'm going to be kind of like crafted vulnerable, I'm going to craft my vulnerability, but I'm not actually showing up. I'm not actually fully in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, those facades and oh yeah, I mean there's that line in terms of personal and private, and it's about getting as close to that line as possible. But there's certain things that just we, and each of us draws what that line is, and being able to see what's relatable. I mean, at the end of the day, for the most part, we are the after to our clients before. And so us leading through, forward through the charge is creates that inspiration, that connection, and that desire in them. So what do you think is important as it relates to like the structure? Is it just, intro who you are, seed the offer, have 3 talking points, pitch at this perfect time, and then collect their signatures and credit cards? Like what's a structure of something that's impactful, with whatever end desire you want?
Yeah, I think of it as I have a talk map that I share
Mm,
that kind of goes through the 3 acts of a story. Like a story has 3 acts.
mm-hmm.
There's the before, there's the action, there's the after. And so I think of the talk as a story. So I share a map that takes you through like what are the elements of Act 1, what are the elements of Act 2, what are the elements of Act 3, so that you can really build that arc. And I like to think of the map as just a map, not a template, or that still I trust the the intuitive knowing
Mm,
of storytelling.
mm,
And so I like to use the map as something to push against. But
yeah.
it is identifying like how you connect with your audience right out of the gate. How do you communicate? This is for you. I'm here for you. I'm an expert and I'm here to deliver value to you.
Mm-hmm.
And to connect with the what's the struggle? What's
Mm,
the struggle? You know? And then to move into the story, like the
yeah.
obstacles. So you're trying to get this thing. What's the struggle and what's the vision? And then as you go for your vision, what gets in the way? What has gotten in the way of your vision?
Mm,
And then here's how I can support you in getting to your vision.
yeah.
It's kind of a rough, you
Well,
know.
I mean, but it's a nice framework to follow, because it really allows, what I like is it allows for flexibility for someone to show up in the way that they show up best for their clients, and but still provides that flow that ends up leading to the result, which, you know, we both work with entrepreneurs and business owners, and of course we're in the business of being in business, so we can't not talk about this, which is how do you leverage your talk for sales, even if it's not a sales talk, right? So there are places that we speak where we're not allowed to pitch. We can't say, go buy this, here's my whatever thing, and whatever. It's a kind of, yes, maybe we get them to a lead magnet kind of situation, but how do you sell when you're not really allowed to sell? And then how do you sell when you are blatantly allowed to sell?
Well, I think when you're not allowed to sell, it's about making a connection. The
Mhm.
main goal is to make a connection, and you're building a relationship. This is, maybe in most cases, the first time you're meeting these people for the first time.
Yeah.
And when I look at a talk and engineering a talk, I think about like, here's the talk. Where do you want people to be at the end of the talk? But
Mm-hmm.
where do you want them to be in a week, in a month, in three
Mm,
months? So really thinking about the long arc. It's not just the talk. You're really thinking about where do you want these people to be 3 months down the road or a year. So having that picture in your mind is like, then how do you see that as you're crafting your talk?
mm,
So any way to deliver value, that there are ways to deliver value to get your audience connected to you. Just simply text me this number if you want if you want to take my quiz, or if you want to, and then you get to nurture the relationship outside
mm,
of the talk.
yeah.
Really thinking strategically about how to get that connection,
Mm,
so that they come to you, so that they want more from you. You're delivering enough value that they see the value you're delivering, but leaving enough question that it's clear there's more.
right. So I know you tend to work with people who, have an established business. I talk about lead strategies as revenue streams. So speaking is a revenue stream because it'll generate leads, which then turn hopefully into money at some point. You can do Facebook ads as a revenue stream, right? Like,
Right.
affiliates are a revenue stream. So what do you want people thinking about when they're looking at activating speaking as a new, or, not a new in terms of all of their business, but as an additional revenue stream in their business?
Yeah, I think it's thinking about. I always talk about the different different level of relationship. So you're building a relationship with somebody in your audience.
Mm.
And how deep does it go? If you
Mm.
have a 5-minute talk versus a 20-minute talk versus a 45-minute talk versus a 90-minute workshop versus a
Right.
half-day workshop versus, is really thinking about how much trust can you build in that amount of time and what can you ask for in that amount of time. So you might ask for an email, or you might invite them to a call, or you might have if I'm giving a 20-minute talk, I might have a free 2-hour workshop coming up, or a $30 2-hour workshop coming up,
Right.
so it's like really thinking, how much relationship have I built in this amount of time, or how much relationship can I build in this amount of time?
Mm.
So how much can I ask for
Mm.
based on that relationship? And
Mm.
it's being able to know what's the relationship I've built, to be able to build that relationship strategically, and then to be able to have different levels of engagement based on that relationship.
Yeah.
And I think
That's
that's, yeah, then once you get their email address, then you can ask for, invite them to a call, and with call you can invite them to your program, or however you
Are
build your
you actually
pipeline.
saying that you're supposed to follow up with people after you get their contact information? Is that how you actually monetize when it comes to speaking?
Well, you're so clever. You're so clever, Cass. How did you figure that out?
What?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's why, like, the speaking is one touch point of many. It's not the end of the relationship. It's one touch point of many. So it's really
Mm.
having that pipeline and that plan for nurturing that relationship.
I love that. I mean, there's all kinds of statistics out there, but not everybody is ready to buy in that moment. Right after meeting you, there are always bluebirds. There are always people who are ready, but you can't
Yeah,
build your business on bluebirds. You
right,
have to have that consistency and predictability. And that comes with, consistency and predictability and how you show up in the world.
right, right.
Shocker, they're correlated.
And I have it all the time. I think, I don't know, I think because a lot of people have fear of speaking, and they put it off for a year or 2 years or whatever because it's so scary and uncomfortable. I frequently have people reach out to me and say, "Oh, I heard you speak 5 years ago, and now I'm ready. I heard you speak,
Mm.
I heard you speak at that conference 2 years ago, and now I'm ready."
Yeah,
So because I've kept that connection,
exactly.
there was some seed planted. They weren't ready then, but
Right.
they followed me. They stayed in relationship. I stayed in connection. And then when they're ready, I'm there.
Exactly. Oh, thank you. Because it's absolutely not about forcing someone to buy right away. It's about holding the space so that when they get to that place where they're ready to make a decision, you're one of the people they consider buying from because you have held that space as a human and not like a jerk who turned their back once they got a single no,
Right.
right? And they
Right.
kind of did a use and lose kind of approach.
Yeah. And there's also, one of my highest converting talks, in a way, it was a TED style talk. This wasn't my TEDx talk, but when I first started my business, this was like now seven-ish years ago, I gave a talk that was very vulnerable. I was invited to give a talk about how I walk the edge. And at that point,
Mm.
the story that was alive in me was my story of not having children. And
Mm.
that felt to me one of the ways I walk the edge. So I told the story of not having children. And it was a very personal story, very personal journey, very personal. And I knew that was a story I had to tell. So that was the talk that I gave. And that was the morning I was like in my bed under the covers saying, "Why do you do this, Johanna? You don't have to. You can cancel. It's okay." And I'm like trying to come up with excuses for how I can get out of this talk. And I went that night to give the talk, and even backstage, I'm standing backstage 5 minutes before I go on, and I'm considering running the other way. And I said to myself, if there's one person in the audience who
Mm.
needs to hear this talk today, that I'm giving this talk for her.
Right.
And so that was what got me onto stage. And there was one person and many more. And that talk
Mm.
has, it's online and it's been shared, and people still reach out to me today because of my vulnerability on that stage in that moment, because of the story I told. they still reach out to me today and want to work with me. And so I think by showing up fully as yourself and just like putting it out there, this is who I am, this is my expertise, this is my genius, this is my humanity, my vulnerability, that's where the connection gets made. And
Yes.
so it's really, having a powerful talk makes
And showing up for it,
and
right?
showing up for it. Yeah. It's a huge difference.
Johanna, you've been amazing. I mean, there's so much in what you shared today that is implementable, not a word, usable, and that people can absolutely leverage today to start with that, converting their talks even better just with what you shared today. How can people get in touch with you? And is there anything you want to share with them?
Well, I have an assessment that I created. It's the Confident Speaker Quiz, and it's 4 categories looking at mindset, content, delivery, and marketing, which I think are the 4 pieces to really being able to step up and out as a confident speaker. So it's an assessment where you just get to kind of look at where you are in each of those categories and where the gaps are. And then based on your results, I share some other some more content and gifts. Awesome. So I'd love to offer that,
please,
to your people. The you can get it at confidentspeakerquiz.com.
Nice. So that is going to be in the show notes for everyone who's listening right now. So that will be easily accessible for you guys, as well as all the nuggets that were dropped today by Johanna. Anything else that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I just like to say, if you hear the call to speak, do it. That not everybody has to get on stage and speak. You don't have to. If you don't hear the call, go do something else.
Right.
Go do something else. But if you hear the call, even if it's a whisper, it means somebody's out there, like you have value to deliver that somebody needs to hear. You can change somebody's life. You have the power to change somebody's life. What you have to say matters. Your story will make a difference to somebody. So if you hear that call, if somewhere in your bones you know that, don't wait. Don't wait, because that person is out there today needing you. So I say go for it. Take the leap. Go before you're ready. Go before you're ready.
Go before that, like right there. Go before you're ready. If you hear it, go before you're ready. Yeah. I love that. Johanna, thank you so much for being on today. You've been amazing. And guys, make sure you check out the link for that assessment about that confidence in speaking and just getting and filling in those gaps, because it's not about fixing everything. It's just these small little tweaks, small hinges swing big doors. And again, thank you again so much for coming on today.
You're so welcome. Thank you.